Hi guys, welcome to Second Perspective. This is another QQ. My name is Paul Weston. Over there is Mitch Allen, and today we will be doing a discussion on Pawn Sacrifice. It just recently was in theaters, and yeah. So if you haven't seen the film, as you would probably guess, stop. There's spoilers abound, and okay, you haven't had enough time to stop the film.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
video rather.
So presumably you've just left your computer, gone to the theater, and then come back and that was nice of you.
Other than that, the short synopsis of our review, we both gave it a C+. We didn't really recommend people to go see it in theaters anyways. And we both had very similar issues with it, largely being it felt sort of longer than it needed to be. It repeated certain aspects that, like, hey, he's mentally ill. Okay, we get it. Not to say, like, if there was certain progression to these things, that would be fine, but it felt, if there was progression, it was very slow. Oh yeah, Peter Sarsgaard's the best.
He's just generally great. I just like him a lot.
I know I've seen him before, and I recognized him. I couldn't remember his name when I was watching it, but yeah, easily he had my favorite performance. Yeah, the first topic that we are going to go to talk about is the same one that we also brought up last week, or probably even last week, 3 days ago, with The Walk,
sure.
With the fact that there was also a documentary. And we're talking about sort of the differences in the values and strengths and weaknesses versus like live action and documentary. And whereas I could see The Walk prospering as a live action film, especially because I didn't have any footage of the man walking on the wire and so on and so forth. And like whereas The Walk, it just sort of it failed on execution. With this film, I had a really hard time seeing sort of a place where it would succeed. I think it was sort of kind of doomed to fail from the start. Or at least I don't think I have a very hard time believing that this would be an A- film, unless it was by the hand of like a master.
Yeah.
It's just this topic, this discussion, this story itself lends itself so much more to a documentary. Like, whereas most of my issues with the film came with the idea that it couldn't. Like, I was actually talking to Mitch, or telling Mitch off the air that there's a part in Game 1 where Bobby Fischer makes a move and he takes
Game 1 of the championship.
Yes,
to be clear, right?
Game 1 of the championship. Thank you for the clarification. Against Boris Spassky, he uses his bishop and takes the pawn on the bottom edge of the board. And then people go like, "Oh no!" And he goes, "Oh no, I can't believe he made that mistake." And then he loses. That's what happens in the live action film. But with the documentary, it tells you, okay, first of all, the reason that people are like, "Oh my god, it's a terrible move," is that no one, like an amateur player, probably wouldn't make that move. Like anyone who's played the game with any sort of sense, like, so I'm a half decent player, so like I probably wouldn't even make that move. And these are grandmasters, so it's a fact like, okay, and the reason he wouldn't make that move is all he has to do is once he takes the pawn, Boris Spassky just moves his pawn up one, which is a move that almost anyone could see, and he loses that bishop. And because he loses that bishop, a grandmaster like Boris Spassky, the best player in the world at that time, can easily take that advantage, that blunder, and win the game. Right? That all of a sudden now it becomes interesting, right? Like, we understand sort of the significance and the magnitude of what happened, especially with the fact that Bobby Fischer denied a draw through sort of arrogance beforehand. Okay, now we understand why Game 1 was so important and why we thought he might tilt.
Well, what that moment like communicates, which is just sort of the same as the rest of the movie, although it's in a new location, so it's a little more interesting, is that, he hears the whir of the cameras and like the little coughs from the audience and stuff, and that seems to set him off his game, and then he makes a mistake. But for me, like, I play chess, but very, very, very few times, and not nearly enough to know that move is not done by anyone who's a master. I just thought that he made a mistake and he didn't see it, and then Spassky took advantage. But I didn't realize it was so unbelievably callous and dumb of him to do,
right?
Because it's just not established before. I mean, the rules of chess or even the specifics of those games are just not established. And I think you're right. In a documentary, that's a little easier to get to.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that was my main issue with the film. And like when he first meets, I don't even remember the guy's name. But when he's like 6 years old or whatever, and he plays that guy, and he's like, who taught him these moves? He's like, oh, he taught himself. Like, they don't even tell you like what moves he makes to make it sort of interesting.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
Maybe it's because I do like chess more than the average person, that I'm a little more interested in the moves, but like I still think there's so much...
but I've seen plenty of sports movies like hockey or football where like what plays that they're doing. And even if like you're a casual viewer, like I don't know a ton about like sports, but even if you're a casual viewer, you get that something is riskier. You get the context. And there's just not enough context here. It's just sort of mushy, like this bad, this make him anxious, like almost like Hulk speak. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of just how like bland and sort of vague it is. Yeah.
And like I don't totally fault the filmmakers, because like chess is not cinematic. It's two people sitting side by side, and they move pieces, right? Like games are literally like 3 hours long. So I understand it's inherently very difficult, but that's like, it's like what my business teacher told me when I was like in high school, is like the reason most businesses fail is because the business should have been made in the first place, right?
Right.
Like it's the same thing with this film. Like unless you have a very clever like film technique or thing that that you're like, okay, these errors or the difficulties of this story, and I can tell it through this way, then fine. But it didn't bother doing that, right? I'm so popular with phones right now. So that's the issue, right? I don't know. Like, I saw the documentary, right? So I knew all this information. What I'm saying is, it, as someone who has not seen the documentary, is it true that you did miss this sort of information?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that like I can't tell if the film follows like a set of cliches or if it's just borrowing from a real character. And the only times that it convinced me like it was a little more authentic than some other true to life films were I mentioned this in the review, but like when they're sort of focused on his family and their response to his anti-Semitism and to him going over these tapes on and on about like anti-communism, and yet sort of sounding like a fascist sort of proletariat supportive like character himself. Like it's just the contradictions in himself. I found those fascinating.
Are all true, by the way.
Yeah, and it sounds like an unbelievably interesting mind. And the only glimpses that we get into it, even visually, are just like early on in the movie, or the first scene really, is we see him like ripping on paintings, and the camera does like weird like pans left and right to show that he's nervous, which, unless have never seen a movie before, you get that means he's nervous.
Yeah.
And it's not like it ever explains like, oh, perhaps not that, mental illness can be provided like from, it's the debate nurture versus nature sort of thing, but it doesn't provide any context for why he may have come to receive it or what there's just nothing. It's just mushy.
It doesn't
it's
talk
all
about whether the mental illness is exacerbated by chess or if the chess actually brought it up.
Right. And the only possible way that you see that being a product of chess is Liev Schreiber's character very late. Like this is like, I don't know, 20 minutes before the end of the movie, and all you've seen is Tobey Maguire yelling about like this demand and that demand, and he's yelling at the beach and he's yelling here and there, and you're like, oh my God, Maguire's crazy. Why is Fisher doing this? And then all of a sudden, Spassky, when they're playing, and it's I think after 1 or 2 games that he's lost, and he starts to think his chair has been bugged, and he flips it over, and he turns it around, and he walks around the room, and suddenly you start to think, well, maybe it is the game, maybe it is the ambition to win this game that's driving everyone crazy.
I do think it was kind of interesting that it is a little bit more value or
is that moment true, by the way?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going off the documentary, so if the documentary lied to me, then yes,
of course.
So
but
that's what I put my asterisk on. But from the documentary, it basically says he says, first of all, that his chair was vibrating, right?
Okay.
And that they're trying to screw with him by having it vibrate. And in the documentary, they say that they find a dead fly. Like, they actually get the chair x-rayed, and they find a fly, which makes sense. Like, a fly can actually make things vibrate a little bit, whatever. So, like, even his insanity, quote-unquote, is a little bit more reasonable.
Yeah, it's based on not just, like, Russians are at my door. It's like, oh, I felt something. Like, it's logical in a sense,
And, like, I thought they brought up some interesting ideas with the idea of that the KGB have bugged Boy Spassky's room, and Spassky's like, I know you guys are doing it.
Oh, yeah, and then he makes that whole speech as to, like, now I really want to play because I won't lose this.
Yeah.
Blah, blah.
And, like, it was almost kind of interesting to sort of see how these two geniuses are sort of in a similar space, and like it could have done something. Like, why don't we just get into it sort of now? Like, our main issue for me with the structure is like, and what you said in the review is that it just doesn't. It focuses sort of on two things, and by focusing on two things, at least one sort of unsatisfactorily resolved, and the documentary kind of focused on the other stuff, right? Like, and I feel like when I sort of talking out loud, that it could have been a really interesting idea. It's like, first of all, do you want to focus on Bobby Fischer and sort of his descent into madness, or do you want to focus on the games, right? Because those are two different things, right? There's much more to his life than just the Boy Spassky games. But if you want to focus just on the games, that's fine. Okay, now we know what the end point is who wins. But then when you could have done that, you could have also done something really interesting.
Yeah.
Where you could have contrasted Spassky and Bobby Fischer, right? And like how they both have these sort of really unenviable positions. Like, Spassky's got killer people, like people who are really
just honestly on his ass the whole time. It's true.
Bugging them, right? Bugging his room, and like how when that one Russian loses a game, all of a sudden he's gotten sick, and now he's got to go home and all that stuff. And like Spassky's asking, like, was my Russian colleague, was he actually sick? Right? And like that's interesting, and like they could have focused both on like maybe not even just necessarily the mental illness, but just like when you get to a state of this high, right? When you are basically a genius at something, and there's all this pressure, like this is how people crack. Not just the American, the American goes crazy. The Russian gets betrayed by his own country, or he also goes crazy, right? Like there's so much there that could have been interesting, but instead they talked about stuff that was already done.
Well, like I said, that stuff comes out, and it's around, I really think it's the last half hour to 40 minutes, where all of that stuff between those two characters starts to come out. And I had actually come into this movie not knowing much about it, but just thinking that was the movie. Like, just thinking it would be about two chess masters. One probably would be more foregrounded because he's American and more recognizable. One maybe not, but we would learn about the relationship between them. And that's why I think the last 40 minutes feels like charged and tense, is because you're waiting for each other to break each other, and you're wondering if they respect each other or if they're just know that the other is less. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic that they don't play upon until the very last minute. And they sort of, to add another thing, they don't, I don't even think it's two stories they try to play. It's like three. It's like the Bobby Fischer biopic thing. It's the story between them. And then it's U.S. versus Russia. like it's, Cold War. Let's
Mm.
fuse this whole political context in and see if we can make this whole thing an allegory for the whole Cold War, right?
Mm.
And it's too ambitious to make work when you're not specific enough.
Yeah.
So it's just, it flails.
And like the documentary does it well, right? And like, but they also realize they have the tool to be like, okay, the things that I need to explain or to make it sort of meaningful or make you actually care about these people, I can explain it to you, and you can talk to people who were there, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like, so my main issue with this structure is that I think ultimately they kind of go with like, okay, you know what? Do we want to be red or do we want to be blue or do we want to be yellow? I don't know. Red, no green, no blue. And then by the end they go, okay, no. We want to be yellow, which is the Bobby Fischer biopic. That's okay. That's what we're gonna be.
I guess.
But then the climax is Bobby Fischer beats Boris Spassky.
Right, and then he walks away.
And he walks away.
And then the last moment is him saying something about there really weren't too many moves. Like they're just going to end up in the same place no matter what. So there's the film about destiny and about making unavoidable choices. Like I didn't see that for a while. And then after that, it doesn't answer that. It just sort of goes, here's the rest of his life and
15 seconds of archival footage, right? Which you
I have
see
to
in the
say
documentary.
The other big weakness is they do a ton of like either real archival footage or like fake plus real archival footage, like Close Gumpy, where it's like a bad green screen of like Tobey Maguire on Bobby Fischer's face, and then he's talking to a real reporter where they could have recreated it. It's like they keep throwing every trick in the book that way to try to like visually spice it up, even though it's the most interesting stuff for me is just get him in a room, get him to play chess. Don't skip over the chess games like they do, and tell us.
I don't understand
why the hell it matters. Yeah.
Why would you make a chess if you want to make a chess?
You want to make a chess movie? Make a chess movie. Yeah,
like we watch. Like if you're afraid that people are not going to find that part interesting, then don't make the film, right? Like that's my argument to that. Is like if
Bridge
you
of Spies is opening in 2 weeks.
Pardon?
Or a week. Like if you want a Cold War movie, watch Bridge of Spies.
Yeah.
Which I get that this is a Cold War movie, but there's so much more specific things going up here.
I just, that's, so it's just sort of like, if you're gonna make a chess movie, commit. Like we watch, as you said, a biopic, like biopics and sports movies and stuff like that. And it's just, if you're gonna make a chess movie, commit to the idea of it's a chess movie, and like understand, like, okay, there are some things where you can't explain like Queen's opening or Queen's defense. Or, like, Kane's Indian. Like, all these things, okay, I understand, but you don't. And, like, okay, fine. But, like, still don't shy it away. Like, show it, and then find a way to explain it. Like, the whole, like, on Reddit thing was, like, ELI 5. Explain it to me like I'm 5, right? Just find ways of quickly and succinctly explaining something, or visually or otherwise, and then do it, right? That's what we as filmmakers are supposed to do, right? That's why we have so long to write a script, right? So, and I'm not saying like what they stumbled on or whatever is easy, because it's not. It's outrageously hard. But
but they do. No, but I think the problem, and I mean to transition to like another thing that you found, but it's just the movie's just blunt when it needs to be and not specific when it should be. So it's blunt in the fact that it's like blue versus red and, mental crazy versus not crazy. Like Michael Stolberg's the manager, always trying to put the pieces together, and Maguire's the crazy one at the beach. But it's so blunt at times. And then the title, I thought, might have hinted at like a bit of subtlety. It has this pawn sacrifice, this image of like someone sacrificing like a small player in for the purpose of like a larger goal. Like perhaps someone slips up or someone offers something small, which is what I thought when I was looking at the title. Someone offers something small and does it at the price of something a lot bigger without even knowing it. And I thought that's a good allegory for Fisher's life, is just him slipping up these few times in the goal of something greater, to just get that like large victory. And then Paul here finds this thing on Wikipedia and
ruins that. So we're gonna talk something a little bit more wide in sort of like filmmaking, art in general, and because we both had the same sort of reaction of ugh when I found this. But essentially, it's on Wikipedia, and it's the director saying something. Here, I'll just read it. It says, title
Sure.
meaning. Director Edward Zick explained the meaning of the movie's title. You have Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon calling Bobby Fischer. You have Brezhnev, I am terribly sorry if I said that wrong, and the KGB agents following Boris Batsky. Both of these men were pawns of their nations. Mitch, why don't you explain why we both went, ugh, when we first read that?
Because if it wasn't obvious from the fact that Russia and the United States right now are enemies, that people use people in war, then I'm frustrated as to why you could take a title that's like potentially interesting or a concept like chess and just reduce it to its basic element, which is war, which we get. If no one knew that chess like resembled war, sure, that's fine. But I'm pretty sure a lot of people get it. So now you're saying the movie's about like that political debate. So I don't understand. So I don't understand what the movie is about. Then you just confused me again. That now they're pawns, but it's not. But it doesn't show the people in the offices. It doesn't show the president. It doesn't show the KGB agents. It shows them, and I don't know that they feel like pawns. They seem pretty entrepreneurial to me. I don't know.
I also have some sort of more wide, general issues with. First of all, the director just explaining what the title is.
That's true. That's why like someone like Scorsese just doesn't do that, because he immediately people ask him like, "Oh, what was this?" and he goes, "Just watch the movie."
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I'm trying to bring up is that more than anything is like when you read a lot of the quotes from some of the more the stronger artists and like the people that often a lot of people look up to. They all are very similar on the idea of like, I'm not going to explain a single thing about my piece of work to you. Nothing. You can ask me questions about it, everything else, but I'm not going to explain what the meaning is. And there's sort of like two reasons. And one is that let the audience have their own response to it. Like and like when you know that you're not going to explain to anyone, then you know that you have to be very clear and concise and specific, and you have to put the work into the art to actually get your point across. So, like one, it gives you sort of like a self-regulator to make sure that you actually do well. But also, when there's so many different ways that people can experience things, and like that's why music is so awesome in a lot of ways, is because like you can't really explain it. This is the music is supposed to make you feel like this. You just listen to it, and there's gonna be like if there's a concert of 10,000 people, there's gonna be 10,000 different interpretations, right? And so
or even feelings toward it. I mean,
exactly, right?
Liking or not liking something is just you should have the ability to respond to something intellectually and emotionally just however you feel. So if you, I mean, that's that. You know, we're also in a very review-driven culture where, and I've fallen prone to it too, where it's just sort of look at the tomato meter or whatever it is, the Rotten Tomatoes meter, and you go, well, this movie doesn't look that good. Well, this movie looks great. And you're like, well, am I interested in this movie or am I not interested in this movie? And I feel like we're just, in today's film culture, we're used to just like baiting people and having them know as much as possible. And yet also this weird dichotomy with like spoiler culture. We're afraid of like revealing the details of a movie. But as soon as we know the details of a movie, let's talk about it as much as possible and like suck the mystery out of everything. You know what I mean?
Which is interesting. It's weird. You say it on a show like this, right?
No, I know. And I think you have to be able to discuss it too. But you also have to be open to the fact that maybe your interpretation is not right.
Yeah. Well, like that art has mystery, right? There's a certain gap that you can't explain. So that's just to wrap up my sort of thought on like the whole idea of don't tell people the meaning of anything, especially your title. It's one if as soon as you explain it, the art becomes binary, right? It's this or it's that, right? You either go people go I agree or that's stupid. And the last
Right.
thing is a quote that my dad used to say to me fairly often, is that like it's better that people you don't say anything and people assume that you're an idiot than to speak out loud and prove that you are, right? And like that's sort of the way I kind of link it to not telling people something is that like sometimes you're gonna go, you know what, I just did it. People will find genius in it anyways, and right, you know, maybe in a subconscious level there is, but by telling people, you kind of show your cards, right?
Yeah.
So on a
Well,
purely
that
selfish level, you can just
when you
like
told
let
me
people
about
think
that, I just immediately was like, oh, so I didn't like this movie. Like now I get why I didn't like it because you're just confusing me. So that's like it just sort of pointed it further towards where if he's had not said anything, was just sort of like, what's the title about? Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah,
Then
and
you
it's
sort
not
of
even
go,
necessarily like, and like you don't have to be like all pretentious about it, like you know,
no, you
well,
don't have to
like
be
what do you
like,
think?
well,
But
it's about the mysteries of life. Like
yeah,
you have to say, I don't.
well,
Like,
you
try it.
said it in not so many
Yeah.
words before. It's just like, you know what, I made it from a place in here,
Mhm.
but the great thing about art is that when you experience, you'll experience something else, and
Perfect.
I shouldn't nor should I want to explain it to you because it will soil your own experience that no one else
Mhm.
can have, right? And like that's why you don't explain what it means, right? And anything in your film, the climax, who is what, just don't, right? Just let it be because that is the highest chance I think for it to grow. Other than that, do you have anything that you want to leave off on?
Yeah.
At
One
risk
quick
of
thing
us,
is just sort
go
of
for
didn't
it.
really factor into what we were talking about, but like the score and the soundtrack they used
Mm.
was just it was just poorly chosen. It's not like there were bad songs or their music was particularly bad. It was just always belaboring something. So when it wanted you to be excited, like immediately, like a top 70s hit that was like pretty, groovy would like come up. I think it was like right after he wins one of the games and it like pumps up to full volume and it's like telling you like feel happy about it
Okay,
or feel
so I have a
sad about
question.
this.
I have
And
a
it's just,
question for you then.
yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so okay, we understand the film. It's prone to telling us how it feels.
Yeah.
What's an example of something that's a little more, I guess, subtle, or something that you were looking for? Like what would have
Like
been
in this film or
either in this film or in another film, without ruining anything? But like, what's a good
sure.
example of
I'm trying like what like contrast to it something, I guess like you have
a good score
uh
choice in
yeah,
your
you
mind?
have like wall to wall music in this
Mhm.
versus like a film like Sicario, which I just saw, which both of us really liked. But I mean, you reviewed recently. It allows you, like, I think sound wise, it does it a lot, but also with dialogue and that sort of thing. It allows moments to just play in patience
Mm.
and just allow the audience to have a feeling overcome them
Mm.
and slowly you just become aware of what the filmmaker is trying to make you feel or what you think is happening in the scene
So
rather than like so in Sicario there's a scene where it's no dialogue and it's people just without spoiling anything it's people just walking down into something
yeah.
and there's no dialogue over it, there's no one saying anything, but there's a very clear idea being conveyed. Whereas in this, you have like, and he won. It's going to be all right. Going to be a hit tonight. Like it's just everything is just so. It's expository. It's a lot like The Walk in that way, where it's just it points too much in that direction, and the score is a little heavy-handed in that sense. So,
Interesting, yeah, because I like as like for people who don't know, Mitch is much more sort of sound oriented, and
yeah.
I'm not. And so I'm just kind of curious, like what shows good score choice and what shows poor score choice.
Yeah.
And like I guess it's like, I mean, if someone wants to be happy, pick happy music. If someone wants to be sad, pick sad music. I guess like that's the
Well,
shrinking it
no,
down
it's
to
actually
really.
it's actually sort of subverting that a little bit. It's like
Well, no, that's
for
what I mean.
me,
Like that's what I mean.
yeah, sorry,
Is not
yeah,
the best idea. That's being too
yeah,
heavy-handed, right?
yeah. When filmmakers can subvert their films with interesting choices, like any element of surprise ever is nice, but especially I think when it comes to music and score, that's where you can sort of get away with introducing something a little offbeat that pulls you in a different direction. You know, it's like the silent part of that, or the hidden part of that process. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, for the first time ever, I think we've got a fairly decent timing. So I'm gonna stop us before we accidentally talk for another half hour.
No.
Thanks for joining us with Pawn Sacrifice. Clearly, Mitch and I enjoy doing this. We'll be doing more in the near future. My name is Paul Weston, and over there is Mitchell Allen. Say goodbye to the internet, man.
See you, man. See you, internet.
Bye.